I need them to understand how badly their infidelity has hurt me. I need them to feel the weight of it. I need them to feel crushed the way that I've been crushed. This is a very common way to respond to the hurt and the betrayal trauma that's caused by infidelity. And it's absolutely important that you be validated, that you receive outside confirmation that what you went through was real, especially when there was gaslighting involved. But I do want to challenge this mindset a little bit, because an overemphasis on needing them to understand your pain can actually keep you stuck in that pain. And there are a couple different reasons why this happens. The first is kind of obvious. If you're going to be spending day after day explaining your pain to them, where do you have to be in your own mind? You have to keep going back to the pain, to revisit it, to explain it from different angles, to come up with different analogies, revisit different details that otherwise you might have been able to start healing from and start moving on from, but you keep going back to it because you're trying to make them understand. The second thing that doesn't really work, though, is that no matter how much pain you can get them to understand, it's never going to be the full reality. It's never going to be the full experience that you had. You can't simulate the experience of being fooled. The whole premise of let me show you how much this hurt doesn't map one-to-one, because you're starting with the phrase, let me show you, because you're already telling them what you're doing. A huge part of the pain of betrayal was the fact that you were in the dark, that you had no idea, that you were being lied to, that you were being gaslit. And so this idea of needing them to understand just how much pain that you were in not only keeps you in pain, but it's also philosophically impossible because they can't ever fully understand what it's like. So then it sometimes turns into this idea of needing justice. Like if they suffer enough, then things will finally be fair. The scales will balance. You'll finally get some relief. But that isn't really how pain works. Usually there isn't a point where they feel enough guilt that suddenly you feel better, or that they become so ashamed and so despondent that suddenly you feel like everything that happened to you was okay. Pain doesn't really work that way. It's kind of like eye for an eye makes the world go blind. If you lose all your money, having somebody else lose all their money doesn't really help you with the fact that you don't have any money. And then the third big piece is sometimes people will tell me, okay, I understand what you're saying, but if I'm going to be with them, if I'm going to try to reconcile, they have to understand how bad it was so that they don't do it again. But they should have already known that it was bad. And yes, they might not have understood the full severity while they were doing it, but they did understand that it was a severe offense. They understood that it was a severe betrayal, even if they didn't fully understand. They might have thought it was an 8 out of 10 bad instead of it's actually a 12 out of 10 bad. So even if they underestimated how painful it was going to be for you, the fact that they knew it was going to be at least somewhat painful, that should have been enough for them to understand the impact, have empathy, and correct course before doing it. So let's say that the pain of what they did to you was objectively a 12 out of 10 bad pain. And before they did it, they thought that it was an 8 out of 10 bad. And after it's happened, they now think that it's a 10 out of 10 bad. Does getting them from a 10 to a 12 actually change whether or not you can trust them moving forward? Not really. Like, I don't see how that makes a difference. The problem isn't that they don't understand how bad it was. The problem is that something was going on inside them that allowed them to break their own moral compass. Because their understanding matters less than their behavior. So instead of asking, have they emotionally come to terms with just how horrible my experience is, track things that are actually observable. Like, are they being honest when lying would be easier for them? Are they being proactive with bringing things up that would be helpful instead of just waiting for me to initiate the conversation every time? Are they able to be both explaining some of their rationale without justifying it and sitting with your pain as well? Like, do they have room to hold all of that without shutting the conversation down? Do they seem to be behaving consistently even when they're not aware that they're being observed? Those things matter so much more than trying to get inside someone else's mind and discern just how much pain they themselves are in because of the pain they've put you through. And I think it connects to a broader problem that a lot of people have in the world, is that we think that empathy and sympathy means that we should suffer and that suffering would somehow fix problems in the world. It makes me think of if somebody approached me on the street asking for money for them to be able to buy dinner, and I just started crying. Like, what good are my tears? I either help them, give them money, give them food, or I don't. But me just sitting there crying and feeling bad for them isn't going to help them. It's actually kind of patronizing. It's condescending. Consistent actions matter so much more than tearful speeches in that context, as well as in the context of rebuilding trust. What I'm looking for personally, far more, is not that they understand the pain that they caused, but that they understand how they got there themselves. That piece, I think, is vital. Because if they can't understand what in the world was going on in their own life, in their own mind, that allowed them to break their own moral compass, then certainly it's a very valid, open question of how can anybody be confident they won't do it again if they haven't done any work to figure out how they got there. That's what they need to understand. And so let's take a massive step back. What's actually going on underneath this? I think people just need to be validated, especially when they feel like they were going crazy. They were aware at some level, their gut level in their body, they knew that something was off, and they asked questions about it, and they were gaslit, they were denied, conversations were avoided, and it just made them feel like they were going crazy. And so instead of trying to get your partner who betrayed you to validate your reality, just understand that sort of anybody will do. You just need someone to confirm that you're not going crazy. You need someone to tell you that what you're experiencing was real. And do not depend on the person who invalidated your reality to not be the person to validate it. They might still be, even if they are genuinely healing and getting to the bottom of their patterns, they might still be in the habit of just knee-jerk being defensive or knee-jerk denying your perception of things and wanting to argue. Like, that is just not, like, your relationship clearly isn't very good right now. They're not the best person to get that validation from. And again, you need some of it. I'm not saying that you need none. But if they're still dealing with the underlying guilt, shame, avoidance, fears that led them to be capable of doing this in the first place, why do you think that they would be good and able and willing to sit with you in the way that you need right now? Yes, they should get there, but you need healing and validation right now. So don't wait for them to be ready for you to be able to heal. And I think it should just be very clear to you, especially if you're early on in your recovery journey, that they're likely not going to validate everything anytime soon. You are able to move forward, start healing, start piecing together your reality again without them giving their stamp of approval. You need to get to a place where the single letter I, the pronoun I, means something to you in terms of holding this weight, carrying authority, where you can say, I know what happened to me. I know how it affected me. I know it was serious. I know what I need. For so many betrayed partners, I'll ask them about what they think happened, how they think that they got to this place. I'll just ask them for the story. And they're constantly using he and she all over the place. And my family thinks this, my friends think that. I'm like, what in the world do you think? You have to come to a place where you feel confident enough to have your own very firm opinions on things. And part of that does include expecting them to be accountable, have empathy, be honest, be transparent, be patient, hear difficult things, talk about difficult things, be consistent if you're in the context of reconciling. But there is a humongous difference between saying, I need you to do all these things and be these ways so that I can know that you are worth trusting, or at least considering trusting again, versus saying, I need you to understand these things so that my pain can go away because you need to carry it. The first is a reasonable prerequisite. The second is just setting yourself up for failure. They should do that. In an ideal world, they should. But in an ideal world, parents would never traumatize their children. In an ideal world, people would all have jobs that are fulfilling and pay them plenty of money. We just can't operate in fantasy land where this person is suddenly going to be the partner you always needed. So to summarize, healing does not come, it cannot come, from finally making the other person hurt enough. It's not how pain works. It just keeps you trapped in pain, and it would never be enough. It comes from validating your own reality to yourself and with trusted people, not from them. This does not mean you're letting them off the hook. This does not mean that you're expecting nothing of them. It just means that you're not expecting your healing from them.